2024. Welcome councillors, welcome staff, welcome media and welcome members of the public, as well as those online. Right, we have one approved leave of absence from Councillor Esther Whitehead, and we also have an apology from the Deputy Mayor Smith, who is sick today. Do I have any leaves of absence? None at all. Brilliant. So I move that the apology from Quentin Smith be accepted. Seconder, please. Thank you. Cody, all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Any declarations of conflict of interest? None at all. Thank you. There are no matters lying on the table. There are no special announcements. Public forum, we have 4 today. We start, Pierre. Usual, 3 minutes each. Start when you're ready.
Kia ora katoa. We want to start by thanking the Resilience and Climate Action team for reaching out to us and for taking into consideration some of our suggestions for the Climate Action website. That said, the misleading data minimizing the impact of air travel is still online. There is no way forward in this crisis if we refuse to face our responsibilities, and facing our responsibilities starts with accepting the facts. Now, to the latest developments in climate. March was the 10th month in a row to break temperature records, and the last 12 months were 1.58 degrees above pre-industrial average. The warming of the planet during these last 12 months has been 10 times faster than what is expected by the models, 10 times. Let's hope that the coming La Niña cycle will slow this trend down, but with the ocean's temperatures continuing their alarming upward trend, this is not a given. These record temperatures have, of course, consequences. You must have all seen the desert town of Dubai being flooded. Maybe you've also noticed last week's floods in China, and it took a burst dam killing at least 50 for the media to start talking about the floods ravaging Kenya after years of droughts. Also currently, Southern Asia is experiencing a deadly heat wave, and Catalonia is in a state of emergency as they are running out of water. These are just a few examples. As predicted, the situation is getting worse by the day, and the worse it gets, the less we seem to hear about it. Maybe it is anticlimactic because it was predicted, or maybe it is just because many still believe that they are not directly affected. Anyway, here is another prediction, and that one does affect us all. In 2018, the IPCC warned that at 1.5 degrees of warming, we would lose 90% of our coral reefs. We are at 1.5 degrees, and it is happening. The Great Barrier Reef in Australia is suffering its most extreme bleaching event so far. I am sure that many people do not care much about corals, but many of the same people do like to eat fish, and probably they are the same people who also complain that food is too expensive. Well, as many fish species depend on coral reefs to breed, you can expect the population to rapidly dwindle and the price to rise substantially as we lose more and more coral reefs. By the way, it is not just fish dependent on corals that are suffering from the extreme temperatures of the oceans. If you like fish and chips, be warned, cod cannot spawn when temperatures are too high. They're on a fast decline too. We said it many times, no one will solve the climate crisis for you. We urge you to accept your responsibilities as individuals and as leaders of this institution, facing facts like the real impact of air travel and accepting your responsibility are the first steps towards real climate action. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre.
Speaking up, Heather.
Hi. I'm Heather Clay. I'm a social worker at Community Networks in Wanaka. Historically a social worker from mental health services in the Wakatipu and Canterbury, and I live with disability. So I want to talk about disability access, and in particular disability and the difficulties with road crossings. And in particular, I'm talking about McDougall Street in front of the community hub, but also in front of the medical centre, and then Brownston Street. So the reason I draw this to your attention is because the community hub is the one-stop community welfare point in this town, and it is very hard for the largely older population that live on the other side of the road to cross the road. And I'm talking about people with cognitive decline or difficulties and sensory difficulties, so not just wheelchairs. What we need is a couple of islands and either a pedestrian crossing and or red lights. Cars are not obliged to stop unless there's a red light, for pedestrian crossings, and there needs to be at least 1 to 2 on McDougall Street, ideally 1 near the hub or thereabouts, and 1 up by the medical centre, and then another 1 on Brownston Street, so people can walk from Elmsley or that area to the supermarket safely with a frame or a mobility device with cognitive or sensory impairment. So that might mean vision and hearing type stuff. This has been brought to your attention before, though not specifically in those areas. And I have feedback that it's on the 10-year plan. That may not be soon enough from a human rights point of view. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Dean.
Hi guys, my name's Dean Rankin. My parents moved here in 1972, so I'm lucky to call Wanaka home from birth, really. So take the place pretty good at heart. Some of you will probably know that I was responsible for starting the petition for the Local Government Commission. The petition very quickly passed its 1,100 signatures required for this case to go to the Commission, and we're still growing. These signatures have come from residents and ratepayers in the region who have become very frustrated with the QLDC. Those frustrations have not gone away. In fact, they have got worse. QLDC seems to be failing with management, communication, forecasting costs with needs, time and time again. The financial state of the QLDC is at rock bottom, and a large contributing factor for almost everything, every project having massive cost and time blowouts. Some prime examples are Lakeview Project, Ladies Mile Leaking Home, Project Manawa, Arterial Road, Frankton to Queenstown, and Queenstown Main Street. All of these major projects are in Queenstown and bring very little benefit to Wanaka or the Upper Queenstown region. Why are Wanaka ratepayers having to pay for public transport in our rates when this service doesn't even exist? We need to stop wasting money. Sorry, just going forward. The pay rise for the CEO, which puts him very close to the salary of what the Prime Minister is on, and the fact that the CEO has a lot more input and control over what happens in the QLDC, yet none of us voted for him. Councillors are not being listened to and having very little input on big decisions being made. A massive increase in council staff, yet we don't even have a full-time enforcement officer in Wanaka. A big increase in consulting, so problems should be improving, yet problems seem to only be getting worse. Some councillors and major developers may have conflict of interest in some of the projects. Wanaka has a massive potential in front of it if managed correctly, but the QLDC isn't doing this. For example, repeating repairs and changes to roads and intersections. Flood protection on the lakefront for businesses was never made to the correct level. Both stormwater and freshwater supply issues. Wastewater overflowing from the grounds onto the grounds at Project Pure at busy times of the year, and then what's the excess needs to get trucked to Queenstown. Developers who purchase land for workers' accommodation, then the QLDC rezones it. Failing main infrastructure in and around the region. Some of the latest improvements in roading are helping, but the QLDC is very quick to blame the contractor for mistakes. Do these contractors get a name against their mark when a mistake happens? We're getting sick of the excuses that seem to keep coming up. I honestly think that the financials of the QLDC need to be investigated. We need to start wasting money on things that aren't as important to us as sound infrastructure. The findings of the Local Government Commission were that the QLDC needs to increase transparency, improve communication, and work with the Upper Queenstown Community Board. But many of us feel this isn't happening. We have important pressing issues that need to be addressed to get this fast growth of Wanaka in the Upper Queenstown region up to standard in the future. Councillors, please understand that the issue has not disappeared. Trust in the QLDC is at an all-time low, and the level of frustration is an all-time high. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Last but certainly not least, Mark.
Very kind of you to say that, Will. Most of you will probably know I'm Mark Sinclair, Deputy Chair of Wanaka Stakeholders Group, and we have a membership of just over 3,500 people, largely based in the Upper Clutha. It's no secret that the development of Wanaka Airport is back on the agenda, or soon will be, and we're not opposed to development of the airport or to progress or to scheduled air services. We never have been. We've made that very clear. nor are we anti-business or anti-tourism, far from it. Many of our members own or run a business, and many of them are tourism businesses. As you well know, our primary focus has always been seeking transparency and full community involvement around any plans for Wanaka Airport. And I'm afraid to say, councillors, we are already concerned again, only very shortly after we've been caught. We're concerned that there is a strong and repeated messaging from QLDC all of a sudden that the airport, as you put it, is not washing its face financially. One councillor has even said in writing that it's QLDC's worst performing asset. QLDC seems to place zero value on the $70 million in annual revenue which businesses based at Wanaka Airport are generating, or the 147 full-time jobs paying $9.3 million in salaries, or business flowing to the over 700 suppliers to businesses at the airport, or the significant impact of all of this on our local economy. All of this appears to be ignored and not at all factored in. We're concerned that you've rejected many of our quite simple and reasonable requests for transparency relating to the airport's finances, like details of QAC's management fee, understood to be over $300,000 per year and projected in the budgets to grow significantly. Like why the lucrative NASA fees have been taken out of the airport's P&L all of a sudden. Like details of the projected interest payments, what are they, and why QAC fees will ramp up significantly in the coming years. We're concerned to hear that your lease negotiations with Wanaka Airport users have been difficult and protracted and super frustrating, and in some cases, they've been trying for 6 years to renew their leases. You're proposing to raise the rent significantly, but you won't even share the valuation report with them on which those rises are based, which is standard commercial practice. We're concerned at the chronic underinvestment in Wanaka Airport over many years. The Deputy Mayor acknowledged recently publicly that you have been bad landlords over a sustained period. At least we have that acknowledgement. We've repeatedly expressed our view that there is insufficient Upper Clutha community involvement in airport governance, and even your delayed establishment of the liaison committee has failed thus far to improve that situation. And all of this against the background, as Dean has just said, of numerous troubled QLDC projects in the district and unacceptable debt levels, low ratepayer satisfaction, high levels of frustration in Wanaka. Our community board even said in the media recently that it's struggling to engage meaningfully with you, when this is not great. It's not a good picture, and the High Court and the Local Government Commission have both ruled that you need to improve transparency, information flows, and build better relationships with us all. And on a positive note, Glenn, thank you for meeting with us. The previous mayor didn't even want to meet with us at any stage, so at least we have an open dialogue with you, so thanks. Yet what we're seeing is the same set of issues that appear to be ramping up again. So it's time for the QLDC to turn over a new leaf with Wanaka Airport and provide full and frank information, put a full range of options and all the details on the table, and involve the community fully and properly from the outset. Thank you very much for your time.
Moving on, confirmation of the agenda. I move that the agenda be confirmed without additional alteration. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Barry. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye, motion carried. Confirmation of meeting, of minutes of meeting. We've got three additional corrections. Note that a correction has been made to the draft minutes that during item 2, Councillor Cox left the meeting. And additional corrections, Councillor Gladding recorded her vote against the motion for item 6. And the second one, Councillor Gladding left the meeting when the meeting went into concluded. This will be added to the meeting minutes. Is there any further proposed amendments?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just one question on page 8. I'm just preparing the comment. I can't recall it after I spoke. There, in the paragraph it says there was further discussion about the need to do the proposed land swap. In response, it was confirmed the purpose was to consolidate land to build the CAB and to be able to use the outer land to invest in community facilities. I just wondered, is that correct? Was that a correct statement there? Because that wasn't indicated in anything of our decision at that sort of statement. Okay.
I agree with that paragraph as well.
So I just don't know where that came from. I just can't recall it, that's all.
Yeah, my query was with the second part of the next sentence. It said, it stated ideally the land should be freehold, which would also make it easy to install temporary parking. We agreed at the meeting that the temporary parking could go ahead as it was. There was a comment about unlocking funding opportunities, but I'm not sure whether that was.
So, Mr. Chair, I just wondered whether if there's some doubt about, or I can't recall whether we just delete that paragraph.
Or just remove that sentence in question.
Yeah, remove that paragraph. I don't know if it adds or tracks from the minutes that we did. I don't think it would detract from the minutes if we deleted it. That's my view.
It was part of a much greater discussion.
Okay. Remove the paragraph.
I also had a query about another point.
There you go.
Page 21. It's about the discussion of forward. There's a paragraph there, yeah, there's a couple of my council about suggesting the first sentence of the amendment could be added as an advice note. That wasn't quite what I said. The first sentence of the definition I suggested could have been taken out as the definition on its own. The
balance is
remainder of that-
advice.
the remainder is the advice note.
That's correct.
I'm for that. Just
Okay.
And if there is a change through the chair, what change should be made?
As a compromise, councillor Bartlett suggested the first sentence of the
definition.
definition.
I suggest that the first sentence of the definition be the definition, and that the list following that be by way of an advice note. That suit you?
Okay.
There was, as part of that, there was also a request to put forward, after the first amendment was lost, to put forward councillor Bartlett's suggestion. And that was at that point that you disagreed with that. If we're getting accurate.
Well, I think that's because it came after the
Yeah,
vote.
it's already,
Yeah.
it's already been
just-
posited, yeah, okay. Right, any further? Okay, I move that the minutes of the public part of the ordinary meeting of the Queenstown Lakes District Council held on 4th of April 2024 as amended be confirmed as a true and correct record. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Nikki. All those in favour?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you. Item 1, approval of outdoor dining on public space proper policy. It's a mouthful. Page 25 of your papers. Aaron, Winton. Ian. Have you taken?
Fine with me, sorry. I'll just take the papers read. Really? I think we'll take questions.
Okay. Questions, councillors?
I have some queries for clarification and a couple of questions on. And so just wanted to be clarify any mention of removal of furniture after the close of business each day. That was really relating to shared spaces, because if it's not, then it's quite impractical for some of the outdoor spaces to remove their furniture at the end of each operating day.
In the Queenstown context around Earnslaw Park, it's the furniture is a lot more robust. It's left there during overnight. In other areas such as the mall, there's a lot of pedestrian traffic, people out at night. It can actually be a bit of a hazard of people throwing stuff around. So that's sort of why a lot of stuff is removed. It's of a lighter nature. It is more often dependent upon location and practicality.
So will that be set in each individual licensing, whether there's a requirement for that?
As it currently stands, some licenses are very particular. They have to remove furniture at the end of each day, and that's been the case for many, many years. very small number, that restriction isn't placed.
Okay, thank you. The second one, Stuart, I know it's been there for a while, they're talking about a 3 metre wide strip, but on many locations, 3 metre wide strip would preclude outdoor dining, and I'm mainly talking about some of the Wanaka footpaths. Some of the footpaths aren't even 3 metres wide, so just trying to understand, once again, is that on a case by, there's flexibility there. In some areas, you could go have a path less than 3 metres, as we have now.
It would come down, there would be flexibility. That restriction was required by councillors as part of the last review. It was quite a firm restriction, which we hadn't really enforced because of COVID. There is likely going to be an impact on some businesses in busy areas. We would come into the Wanaka Community Board to ask for advice on the Wanaka situation as to how busy the town is in that area, if it is necessary in the Wanaka context to have that width, because there is a variety of footpath widths.
Okay, so there is some flexibility there in the enforcement of, or the imposition of these licenses?
Yes.
Okay.
But sorry, Mr. Just I would note, of course, that if the footpath is too narrow, then it won't be able to have tables there.
Yeah.
Because of the predominance for pedestrian, that's when some of them need to be balanced up.
Yeah, but we've got areas where there's area out on the other side of the footpath, and then the footpath is not 3 metres to the shop. So type occupied, for example. So you would all that outdoor feeding, you can't. If there's not a 3 metre path there, you're going to say we can't have all that outdoor dining there. That's a classic example.
Yeah, we've anticipated that scenario that sometimes footpaths are narrow. It's more to acknowledge that some areas are particularly busy and there are conflicts with pedestrians, people's mobility needs to be able to get around some of these areas. If it's an area which is narrow and the pressure isn't on, pedestrian pressure isn't on, certainly room for flexibility.
Sorry, a couple. The 3-year license, which I think is good. I'm trying to understand, and if this is the case for other licenses other than this here, and a 3-year license, but an annual fee adjustment. Why are we not setting the fees for a 3-year period? Do we do licenses in other areas, for other activities for a longer period, but it still have an annual review of the fee, or do we set fees for longer periods? 1 year doesn't seem very long. A lot of work and administration, also hard for businesses to do all their budgeting and carry on. So I just wondered, why aren't we tying the fee renewal with the 3-year license rather than annually?
The fees are set by council for the table, the outdoor dining.
Yeah, we set them. The time I'm talking about, the time they're set for. So if we, because here we approve a license for 3 years.
Yes.
And then we set a fee for the year, but rather than the license has got to be renewed in 3 years, why can't the fee review be done at the same time in the 3-year period, based on the fees that are set by council rather than annually?
I think it's expected that full council resolution would set the fees, and that would happen in 3 years' time for the next phase of renewals. But each year, fees are usually just reconfirmed.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, it's probably a point worth considering. So whether the council, or because one of the, it was a discussion the council had at the last meeting, was the problem where fees got well out of kilter because they weren't adjusted regularly enough. So the options are to fix a fee for 3 years, or to fix a license with an annual, with a sort of a recognised process for increasing those fees over the course of each license period. Which is probably more reflective of where the value proposition for those areas lies.
Okay. Yeah. The last one was, sorry, just umbrellas. I don't know why we've got such a anti bit of colour or something on umbrellas. And if they're sponsored, what's the problem with it?
I think we're not anti-umbrellas, this provision for umbrellas. What is kind of happening is some of the outdoor dining areas have become more activation spaces, and that comes with a lot of branding and advertising for alcohol advertising is one of those. We're saying umbrellas are fine, but we'd like to sort of think about the branding that goes with that, if it's particularly alcohol related.
Matt?
Thank you. I'm not sure the volume of the licenses that are issued, but given that the licenses are going to expire all on the same date, is there a potential for there to be an administrative backlog as a result of that, and how would that be mitigated?
As it currently stands, and has for a number of years, the licenses all expire on the same date annually. So every year there's a renewal process that we undertake. What we're really suggesting is pushing it out for a 3-year window and doing it better at the time.
So it's done annually and they will expire on the same date annually now.
Yeah, which is around November, December, depending upon if it's Clutha or Queenstown. So they're not all at the same time. But we're getting very well set up to actually do this more streamlined, which is what Ian's been very busy doing.
All right, Lisa and then, okay.
Thank you. Thanks. My question's similar in vein to Councillor Cox. My concern is that we're coming from a less regulated environment to a more regulated environment, that we're therefore going to enforce because policies are there. And it's that we're being very prescriptive around the 3-metre distancing, around the type of heaters, around the branding on the umbrellas. And instead of looking at whether it's sustainable across a social, environmental and economic delivery point for each individual business and what our human experience of that is. And the 3-metre one I've got a real problem with looking at. You look at a Parisian example, all the cafes, people sit with their backs to the windows, tables are up against the buildings. It achieves that safety bit if you're not going back into the street. How are we going to define a 3-metre footpath in shared spaces when all our different businesses have different business frontages? I'd rather see us come from more about maintaining pedestrian through fear by the way we manage the operation of that space. And I know some businesses, for example, have staff that queue home or, yeah, I'm getting there, that's my question. Why do we need to be so prescriptive around distance, heating and umbrellas? We don't even consider infrared heaters, for example, that our technologies might change. Why do we feel we need to be so prescriptive in these measures rather than looking at how just to make that business function effectively?
What I've been very mindful of, and I've been involved with outdoor dining for quite some time, is the policy has always been prescriptive. How it's been managed and implemented could be improved. But if one business does something which is outside of that prescription, let's say, puts up an umbrella that we haven't looked at, or puts up a heater that has the fancy sort of flame going up, but the business next door needs to compete or sort of sees that and says, oh, I need that too. And then it sort of becomes very awkward for us to manage when everyone's almost in an arms race of things that they want and need to get a point of difference.
I feel like we're kind of almost punishing our businesses for their commercial success in some ways, instead of trying to work with them to really ameliorate the environment for the human realm and the business. We're going, how do we get so prescriptive?
You finished with your question? Finished with the answer?
I was just sort of saying, we sort of have to have a line and make it fair for all, and it is very, we'll suggest a line in the policy which really is more of a carryover of previous policies, previous versions of that same policy. I think it's still workable what we're talking about. It shouldn't disadvantage someone if we want to confirm the type of heater or if it's any issues.
Just a comment on that, experience here, certainly experience in Dunedin, probably elsewhere, is having to have some conditions and standards that apply. Otherwise, you get all of the commercial enterprises treating it as a free-for-all in your open space, and around the country, there's some quite bad examples where there's actually lost the pedestrian focus of those areas because it's just been led to the individual commercial enterprise to do whatever they like. And it's also then impacted on the streetscape. So whether these are right or not, I'm not saying, but that's why there are some of these controls to try and allow the staff who are issuing these licenses to have some boundaries. And experiences, if there were no controls and it would be a free for all, and every commercial enterprise would potentially occupy large amounts of the footpath, put up alcohol licensing signs. So it is a question of what is appropriate. That's what these sort of are trying to do. Whether these are right or not.
Because we're also putting those time limits on where, you know, there was a time when Queenstown was a 24/7, 365-day a year town, and that nighttime economy, you know, that could, I feel like we're putting in different considerations that may restrict. So we saw an attrition of businesses open late through COVID, and that perhaps hasn't returned. But we're by some of these policies.
Sorry, Lisa,
Yeah.
you got a question? Further on?
Why do we need time limits on it?
So
The time limit is really actually the district plan sets the time limit. The policy that we're talking about is very open. We are not concerned about the time. If you have resource consent to serve alcohol past a certain time. So in terms of the opening late, look, we're very flexible.
So if you weren't serving alcohol, you could keep your tables out, but you're serving food right through the night? Or would we make them bring them in?
From previous experience talking to police, they wouldn't be in favour of that because of as you get later into the night, potential for more and more aggression and fighting things. Let's be so and here there is some limit to restrict that, so it's not 24/7 every night because of the limits you need to instill in say central areas. That's the reality of late night activity in those urban areas. So and as Aaron said, there is the time limit is in the district plan. There's also there's also liquor licensing restrictions around that as well to try and restrict that nighttime liquor fueled activity, which can actually create quite a disturbance in the areas. So again, it's a balance of trying to figure out how all those things work in an environment.
Yeah.
All right, I've just got 4 questions. So on page 53, we've got the definition of an outdoor dining area. And it says it refers to the consumption of food and beverages. Is there any consideration to that saying food and or beverages, or is it specifically related to both of them at the same or both?
The food and what did you say?
Food and / or beverages. So it could be either rather than both. Or is that not?
And it's
That's the licensing.
Licensing, I'll leave it.
I was going to talk about the licensing. You've got to have, if you're going to have the licensing, you're operating, selling alcohol, you're going to have food. So you might be able to have food without the alcohol, but you can't have alcohol without the food.
Yeah, the whole policy is around outdoor dining. It's not about creating outdoor bars. And that's the key function. So alcohol is associated with the dining function and is second to that.
So yeah, so just to clarify for my mind then, so if you've got outdoor tables, someone's sitting at them, they can't be sitting there just to drink a beer, they've got to have some food as well.
No, they're going to have food available, they can still be sitting here without food, it's not true, not, the liquor license is based on having food available, they don't have to actually be eating.
Well, that's where, that gets me back to where it says consumption of food and beverages. So now you're saying that it's optional whether they have any food or beverages, they could have one or the other. Right. Anyway, so my next question is page 58 says, paragraph at the bottom here about applying to reapply on expiry or transition into the new 3-year license format. So they currently all expire on a yearly basis anyway. So what's the threshold between reapplying or transitioning? What's the difference between those two for anyone who's currently got a license?
Anyone who's currently got a license at the end of this year will have to reapply for a license. However, we're going to have it set up so quite very soon in the next couple of months. If someone wants to move it, basically just transition into that longer period, will be set up to make that happen. If it suits them. It comes down to a choice. They can either just reapply at the end of the year and look at it anew. But if we can get on board early and help some businesses by basically dealing with it now, then we're really happy for that to happen.
I said that we had some strong feedback from businesses last year that end of the year was a busy time and wasn't a good time to be applying, so we're just opening that up earlier to give them more time.
So is there a cut-off date, or does it, it's beyond when their current license expires? They obviously then have to reapply. But is there a date before that they could just transition to the new one?
Yeah, I think 1st of July, we'd like to give people the option to start a new license. A lot of the old licenses, well, the licenses we have, some of the documents are from 2006, carried over. We're trying to get everyone onto a consistent license format, which is clearly understood by them, by us. It's easy to monitor. So that's kind of a bit of a driver too.
Okay. Now the next quick question was page 59 talks about bonds. It says a performance bond may be required. What's the trigger for whether a bond will or will not be required?
We have never actually applied a bond. There's some cases maybe where we might, well, if we were concerned about damage occurring, if the business wasn't as concerned about damage occurring, to protect the ratepayer, we may seek to impose a bond. But the reality is that we have conversations with people, we go and talk to them. It's always easier to do things more amicably.
So it's on a case by case, and it's just a tool that's there if you're assessing an application. You can apply if you feel you need to.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And one more. Councillor Cox mentioned the 3 metre requirement on page 63. Specifically talks about Ballarat Street or the mall in Queenstown. In the middle of the paragraph down, it talks about a minimum corridor of 2 metres in the middle of Ballarat Street, which seems quite narrow. It doesn't follow the 3 metres that's allowed for elsewhere. Potentially, it's because there's already the footpaths either side of the, at the shop fronts. Is that
correct? In Ballarat Street, the mall, the areas under the verandas are always kept open and have always been kept open with the 2 metre strip in the middle for sort of balancing activity. There are a lot of retail businesses in the mall, and they very much like to have a pedestrian flow to be able to sort of see their premises.
Thank you. Thanks.
Vicky?
Thanks. Right, I've got 4, I think, trying to be quick. I just had a concern on page 59 or 9 of the policy, and I mentioned it in an email to you, Aaron. It's under the heading reapplication of a license 3.4, and it says license holders must supply proof of a new license. I'm assuming that means the dining license to the alcohol licensing inspector at the time of lodgement of a new renewal or variation of an alcohol on license. And my question is, why are we creating this connection when we have the potential for delays? Could we be, I guess, because of the delays to our outdoor dining license, be delaying someone renewing their on license? I just don't understand why we've made a connection in there.
Sorry, I'm just looking.
It's on page
Second
59
paragraph.
of the.
Second paragraph down, page 59.
So it's straight above 3.5. So 3.5 is, do you see what I mean? So it's the last sentence of that paragraph. License holders must supply proof of a new license to the alcohol licensing inspector at the time of lodgement of a new renewal or variation of an alcohol on license. So to me, it creates this funky connection. And if we've got a delay in our system, we could be delaying someone renewing, and that would cost them business. But I might be reading it wrong. I wanted to check.
Chair, can I just add to that? What the question we need to clarify is a renewal of a liquor license. As long as you apply before the expiry date of the renewal, the license stays current while the renewal's been processed. Some of them may take 2 years to process. So if the renewal for the outdoor dining area license, if someone applies before the expiry date, is their license still operable while your team are renewing the outdoor license area? Same as for liquor licensing. So what I'm saying is, as long as you apply before the expiry date, you can keep operating outdoors while the renewal's being processed. That would tie, that would,
Why are we tying them together?
well,
What
Hang on, hang on.
What was my question?
Yeah, I'm trying to stop the cross.
I did ask.
Ask the first question, why are we tying them together?
That sentence did come from our alcohol licensing team. I took that forward, added that to the policy. They have a need for their process to make sure that people are sort of getting alcohol,
You can't renew the liquor license unless the license for the, you can't renew the liquor license for the outdoor area if the outdoor area is not approved, so you've got to tie them. What I'm saying is if the renewals can be
Yeah,
treated.
we'll go on to your
same way.
second question first. Will the new outdoor dining license be operable during either when they transition or when they reapply before the expiry date? Similar to what the liquor licensing procedure is.
everyone has an outdoor dining license, and we
Yeah.
do carry those forward. And we talk to liquor licensing and liquor licensing.
No, just put liquor licensing away. It's just purely what,
Yes,
thank you. That's all I. There you go.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Right, so thanks for that. The second one I had an issue was where we have, it's in 2.6, where we have rights of access. And I get it, you know, limited rights of access, we need them. But if that was to go on for some time, a couple of weeks, there's no recompense to that on that fee. So they've paid for the use of that space. But we're saying we've got rights to go in for as long as we like, whenever we like. And I know we'd be reasonable, but there's no certainty for the person who's paid the fee. So I mean, sorry, that's not a question. Why can't we put something in there around limits to our rights of access without refunding fees? So
The access, one that springs to mind is when we had a water main burst in Ballarat Street and council contractors had to go and do the works. I wasn't probably at the time, so I don't know
yeah,
what refund would have been given, but from a reasonable position, and we have our license documents to talk about us talking, and if someone has an issue or an issue with paying too much or a refund, we have that conversation.
okay. I guess what I like the flexibility, but it needs to be fair and there needs to be some certainty. And I think that's what we hear around the table is a little bit of how flexible, how, you know, there's a bit of how are we exercising our discretion? And I think we could tie it down a bit more to give businesses some certainty that there is going to be consistency. That's what I've read through here in the
Questions, sorry.
Sorry, yeah, okay, so that could be in there. That's not an issue because you would do it anyway. It's just that we've not written it in.
Well, I think the answer's been given in terms of what's in the policy here. And if you wanted to change that, then you'd have to make a movement and move it as a motion to change.
Next, and the last one's just around, I had a point on gas heaters, but I'll mention that. The smoking. So we have discussed at length, I think, in the workshops around having limiting smoking and vaping in those outdoor dining spaces. I know there's a mention in there of when a policy comes, when it will be applied, but we've been talking about this since I was on council, you know, nearly 5 years ago. So I think for me, I'd like to see us write that in. Is there a way to write that in now, or are you able to give us a date at which we will
Right, what?
limits to smoking policy?
So
What are the reasons? I guess, okay, the question
Hang on,
is,
but the
what-
smoking policies are relevant to the discussion we're talking about now.
No.
We're talking about outdoor dining. We're
we're
not
talking about outdoor
smoking.
dining, and the deputy mayor was very clear that he was interested in making sure that we didn't allow smoking and vaping in those outdoor dining
But
areas.
that's in the smoking
what-
policy. If that is if that is put into the smoking policy,
Why does the
that will occur when the smoking policy is developed. It's
My
not in this
question is,
policy.
why can't we put it straight into this policy?
There's a smoking policy that I did look into, and I understand it is progressing, and councillors have been participating, getting that moving. A policy such as this with implications for business and the community would probably ideally have community and business input and see where that lands, let's say.
So I think the answer is that through that process, the decision was made to not include a smoking ban in this policy for the reasons that you've outlined.
Right.
That was a decision that was made, wait for the council policy around smoking to apply. That's my understanding why it's not in here. So again, if you wanted it in, you'd have to make a change now, because what we've got in front of us is a policy that doesn't, but that's my understanding of why it's not in.
Can you tell me the understanding of when that policy will be in front of us?
I don't know, don't control it, sorry.
Right. Okay, there's one question. Thanks.
How many licenses do we currently have throughout the district?
Yeah, approximately 50.
Okay, and in the disadvantages of option one, there talks about some licenses that may no longer be successful because of the new rule. How many would fall into that category?
Haven't looked at that.
Specifically.
Specifically.
We're able to analyse success of a business as well as other business.
So are there any problem ones that you see that this might solve?
I think when we're actually going out and having a look, we'll
Yeah.
seek advice from our roading team as to how pedestrian movement happens in certain areas, peaks, if there's issues. I mean, yes, there are some areas which will change. But it's more a case of an area here will get smaller, an area over there will get larger.
Yeah.
To allow better pedestrian flow. Certainly with the CBD upgrades in Queenstown, the way we've got it sort of set out with the street furniture.
Yeah.
There are places now where tables and chairs could happen, but not up against the business wall, let's say, because the landscape makes it too much of a choke point.
Yeah.
People with wheelchairs, prams, mobility needs would have difficulty in those spaces.
Yeah. Oh no, I understand why it is. I just, if we go ahead with this, it quite clearly says some people will potentially not be successful. I'd quite like to know who those people were or what areas they were to understand.
I've spoken to a few concerned businesses that believe it will impact them.
I find it a tough question for them to answer until they actually get the application.
There's decision makers, it would be nice to know.
Any further questions?
Two questions, not directly part of the policy, but related to it. One is, what is the annual revenue that's earned off the table and chair licenses, and what are the annual costs of administering the licenses?
So start with the second part. There isn't a high annual administration cost. We have part of an FTE that does this at one part of the year, so we haven't got the exact administration costs. The application and assessment, that's the biggest time requirements, and what we'll put in front of you is fair reflection of the time required to do that. That's why there's a cost for that application fee. As far as the total revenue, I have to dig it out and have it at my fingertips, but I can circulate that to the council.
160,000. 160,000. There you go. Any further questions? Okay, we've got the proposed resolution in front of us. We have a mover. Thank you, Barry. Second, open discussion. No.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, go for it.
So, yeah, thanks. But I think don't think it's bad policy at all. I just think there's a lot of questions around it, and we've had submissions and hasn't actually come back to councillors to sort of have any input into how those submissions were adopted or not into the policy. I'm just hearing a lot of questions, and I've got some uncertainty over certain things that I'd like clarified. In my mind, I don't have enough information to adopt it. I'd really like to consider. I can't be on table. No. Right. Yeah. Okay. Look. Yeah. I guess my position is that I don't have enough information. I'd like to understand, as Mel said, who's impacted by the 3 metre. I'd like to put something in there around how we'll exercise discretion so that people can be certain there is consistency. I'd like to take a look at the gas heaters. And I'd like to put something in there around limits to our rights of access without refunding. So I appreciate discretion is a good thing, but I think there needs to be some more certainty woven into the policy around how it's exercised.
Okay, just a point of clarification. So you're saying you don't have enough information?
No, I don't. On some parts, I don't have enough information. Other parts, I would have liked to have added things to the policy that aren't there. So to me, the policy is not. I can't approve it as it's written.
Because you don't have enough information.
No, I've just clarified that. Don't have enough information on some things, and there are also policies in there that there's wording that I would like to change or add.
Well, here's your chance.
Okay, well, it might take a while.
Right. Any other further discussion?
Thank you. Formulating my thoughts. There's bits of the policy that are very good, and I get that we need consideration that's commensurate and fair across the district. My concern is that we have hit some anomalies where we say that we would use discretion on a case-by-case basis. I think part of the joy of our areas is a lot of change at the moment between giving more prominence to the human realm and the shared spaces and our laneways and that sense of discovery in our environs and very clever use of space. And I am very concerned about the disadvantages around some of our existing successful operators who may become disadvantaged by us being really strict with this policy. I know we talk about advertising on umbrellas as being, say, alcohol related. A lot of umbrellas are sponsored by coffee producers, and that gets your coffee machine and your umbrellas and whatever if you're a particular coffee stockist. And what we're going to inadvertently do is push a lot of cost onto business operators that currently they are able to come up with relationships with their suppliers that enable enhancement and activation of areas for our public use. I get that this is only on public land, and I've got some concern around even how we measure between fronts of buildings and veranda posts. So my hesitation is around giving prescriptive policy that we're then saying we're going to go out on a case-by-case basis and give a lot of discretion around. And my particular sticking point is around the 3 meters to a pavement edge. How do we determine that in a shared space area? How do we enable our existing successful operators that don't have that distancing between their table and their footpath to still be operating? I've got some concerns that we're going to have to enforce things that will take away from the fantastic amenity that is already offered by some operators. So I'm struggling with this one at this point.
Economist, so I mean, the majority of this policy exists. The 3 meter separation is something that the council specifically instructed a number of years ago. So that's something that, as politicians, you need to address, because that's not something the staff have created. It's something that the council laws specifically introduced.
But we don't currently enforce that, Mike?
As Aaron has said, during the COVID time, that's a lot of things. A lot of rules were relaxed because of the way that businesses were struggling, in the same way that we had businesses who chose not to operate their licence areas because they just didn't have enough custom. So, but as new licenses come on, we will enforce the 3 meter. As Aaron has mentioned, we'll try and be sensible about that. Part of this is actually about providing certainty, and Aaron, I think, and Tony both politely pointed out, we spend a lot of time with applicants who delve in the grey area and create a lot of compliance issues for both the community and the council. So this is about creating greater certainty, which is what, when we began this process, that's what council was interested in trying to achieve. So it will never be perfect, and I think we've indicated that from a practical point of view, we'll work practically with people. But actually what we are looking for as an organisation is greater certainty and clarity, both for the operators and for the community about what this policy will mean.
Just my thoughts picking up on Lyle's point there around alignment of fees, and I guess it's something the councillors annually will have a crack at those fees, but adding that certainty, as Mike was saying, certainty around the operator knowing what those fees are every year, because they've got a license for 3 years, but the fees could ratchet up quite considerably. The second thing that I'm thinking about with this policy as well is enforcement, and I think of the sandwich boards in Queenstown at the moment, challenges around enforcing these. And so the enforcement of the outdoor furniture is always going to be a challenge. We had someone speak earlier this morning about accessibility, and I do think about the clutter, especially on the mall and those sort of areas, and the accessibility due to outdoor furniture. So the enforcement piece is going to become quite important under the new policy.
Good. I support having, I think we do need to have, the ops going to have a policy, you can have some guidelines, I do support it. See, said that you set a standard, I am encouraged, and I hope that you got the message that there will have to be some discretion in some areas, especially around the 3 metre thing. And removing of furniture after operating. I think it's very important that you do outline to all the operators that the renewal process, that you once you applied for renewal, but then also take the pressure off the staff trying to get everything done on one day. You have a renewal process similar to the liquor licensing one, that will work really well.
Any further discussion? Councillors? As a seconder, I'll just chip in now. But this came about pretty much early on in the training union due to a fair few operators knocking on my door. And I think when we had our first meeting regarding this, there was pretty much a cast of thousands, let's say, from every department within the CE's office. Look, this policy has definitely streamlined the application. I congratulate the work that Ian and your team have done on making that a lot better and a lot easier for the operators. I think it does actually give certainty to businesses on what is required of them. It also draws the line of the standard required in our area, especially given the amount of investment we've done both sides of the hill when it comes to the CBD areas. Look, I'm impressed with where the policies come. A lot of the rules that we've been debating have been in here since 2006. These rules have been pretty clear to the operators, so that's why I will be supporting the policy in front of us. So, Barry, you've got the right of reply if you need to, or put it to the vote. I'm happy to leave it. Okay, so I put it to the vote. We've got the 4 items there. The mover was Barry, second and myself. All those in favour? Aye. All those against? 3 against. Motion carried. Moving on. Oh, you might want to start. Outdoor dining fees, item 2, page 66.
I'll take it as read.
Yeah. Questions, councillors?
Yep. Just in terms of the fees, we haven't got any information in front of us about the impact and what's been assumed in the draft LTP of the different fee structure options.
The question.
Well, the question is, do we have any? Can you provide us with the information on that?
Yeah, there's any.
We've got different options for the fees in front of us, right, in the rentals. So we've got, and obviously you can't know for sure because you can't know if people will reapply, but it would be useful to understand the impact on our finances of the different rental and fee options in front of us.
The fee is cost recovery. I think what Councillor Billings asking is whether, perhaps we can just clarify whether the various options, obviously, there's a nominal or notional income associated with the various options are, and where that sits vis-a-vis our anticipated income that we've put into the LTP fund, table and chairs, outdoor dining. Is it the adopted or the recommended option?
And what are the costs of, or what's the recovery through the other options? Because we could recover less rental or more rental
Yes.
through the different options, but we don't understand the impact of that.
But there's an assumed increase in out the dining fees in the LTP.
We just assume that we're not in the policy.
There is. I think that right now, but we'll check so much that was.
That's the fees. Yeah. In terms of
Rental.
that impact will be on what's decided in terms of which option.
We don't have, I guess what I'm saying is we don't understand the quantum. There's nothing in front of us. We don't understand how much we can recover under the different scenarios.
Well, I think that's somewhat dependent on the number of
It is,
events
that's what I
that we have.
Yeah.
And there are other opportunities and continuing opportunities for new businesses to come in and seek a rental. So we can't actually predict what that rental will be. We can understand what the likely income will be based on the current number of rentals that we have.
And I guess that's what I'm asking for, but we haven't done that.
Yeah, right number is 160,000.
Yeah,
based on the.
That's the rental.
Yeah, 55 outdoor dining licenses. Yes, it's a reasonable sum, but the increase, that's what you're asking. If we adopted the proposal, that would go up to 400,000.
Right, that's what I was looking for.
We can't assume that there isn't some fluctuation in that with new ones coming online, some reducing the area, so it's always a moving target.
That's great. And the other question I had, just there was a suggestion on page 39 of the report that the fees were relatively low and that they wouldn't necessarily cover the costs. Is that the case? And how does that? Page 39, ahead of my notes.
That's true.
Yeah, I know, but it was written into there. I think.
Just the application fees, like the cost of processing a variation or any application. Yeah, I think the proposed fees, say at the $450 for a new application, would not cover the full council, full-time staff, but we can also only look at 30% of council
So how
staff.
does that fit with our revenue and financing policy? Is there something, and I should have looked at that before, but do you know whether not recovering costs, what's the percentage in our revenue and financing policy? One off the top.
Right, I'm sure there.
I'm just looking for alignment because we should know.
The intention here was to try and cover costs, but instead of having a variable fee, we wanted to give certainty. So the assumption here is that most would come in at this amount. If there's a very complex one, it could take longer to assess and site visits, etc. That's fine.
So the funding policy generally for these, goes to the cost recovery component without making a profit. That's the general funding policy for these sorts of private good benefits, which has the license requirements.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, so environmental health is something that's come up a lot. We have a percentage that we recover and we work it back and we make sure that we're covering it. I just don't understand what we're setting, the fees that we're setting here, how they relate to our revenue and financing policy. But there is no relate. It looks like it's not covered in the revenue and financing.
Well, I think that these are based on 100% cost recovery from the applicants. And then what Quinton just said is that instead of variable fee, there's a fixed fee which is estimated to cover the costs. So on that basis, there would be no public good benefit to this. Would be at 25% funded, if I'm right in terms of what you said. These fees cover. Do these fees cover the full cost of industry? They don't.
The new application fees, such as reapplication amendment, are about 30% the time
30%,
council
sorry.
staff would spend. We have sort of, I mean, I'm mindful how long sometimes these things can take, and it can be quite involved if an applicant or a customer doesn't want certain things or wants more than other people might. It can take a lot of time, but just trying to set a fee, it is low.
You know, I'm just thinking about the technicalities of how we apply it to all of our other orders. And the other thing I'm just interested in your take on is there's a line in there, and I don't have it in front of me, but it speaks to the fees have gone up a lot, so the rentals, but there is a benefit for from the new streetscapes and so on for the businesses in the area that will be using those spaces. At the same time, we're looking at a targeted rate as an option in the LTP. So there's that potential for them to be almost paying twice, if you see what I mean. And I guess I'm asking for your take on that.
No, so there is no paying twice. I mean, what it implies is that most of these are tenants of landlords. The landlords basically have had effectively benefit from the improvement in the streetscape, which allows them to charge higher lease costs, and that's reflected in the rental costs that they can charge commercially. It's got nothing to do with the council rating, and the fees that we charge for the use of public space for these type of activities, given that they're extensions of private rental spaces, is reflective of the value of those rentals or the comparative value of the rental space that they're part of. So they're actually quite separate from the council rating system.
Well, they are and they're not. I mean, my point is that the landlord will pass on the cost to the person running the business of the targeted rate if one is set, and then that person will be paying.
Hang on. Have you got a question? No. Have you got a question?
No.
Okay. Any further questions?
My question's a little bit the same. So I had tried to find in the revenue and financing policy about this space. So you're saying this is 100% cost.
I know, but wrong. I think Aaron just said we're going to recover about 30%.
Is that in a policy somewhere? No. Or that's just?
This is for each of the applications.
Yeah, I'm talking about just the application fee.
The advice of these fees come from our finance department at a sort of 30% level. We try to put a time roughly need.
Okay.
I'm not that up to play with the finance policies.
Yeah. Because it does, if we're talking about private public benefit and we're saying this is a completely private benefit, then we should be urging on the.
Well, I've obviously got that wrong.
Okay.
So there was a decision at some point about subsidising the fees, the application fees for this.
Council decision.
Hang on.
Well, yeah, I get it is similar, I guess. How did we come to that decision? It just seems a little bit misaligned from other areas. And even in here where you've got the new application fee at $450 saying around 8 hours, and then the amendment also $250, which could take as long as a new one, is almost half the cost. And it doesn't look like we're recovering much at all.
And the fees, the existing and proposed fees are low in both counts. And there's a slight step up. Being mindful that if we went up to full cost recovery, I suppose businesses struggle in some respects.
No, I don't disagree that these are higher costs for them. My next question is, and this is where some of the earlier discussion, so with the new application or the re-application, we're going from 1 year to 3 years. They pay the new or the re-application. Does that last for 3 years, or they have to pay that $250 each year of the 3 years?
They'll just go towards covering the assessment of that 3 year or less when they do apply.
Yeah. And would there be any notion of making it 100% cost recovery, or?
Bring that to council as another resolution, maybe at some stage.
So fees and charges set through the planning process, so let's come back to that process at some point. If you wanted to do that, so we can certainly bring that back next time.
My question's around the annual rental fees and the market rental for 2024 is square meterage. What kind of evidence supports the variations between the different categorizations? I know we're taking a sizable jump from current fees and that we've got a Collier's report behind it. I just think that there's likely to be some questions from the various areas as far as, if we look into, we've got Buckingham Street, Arrowtown going to $250 and yet remaining Arrowtown pavements 175, I would suggest the business community in Arrowtown would look to Ramshaw Lane or either end of the village as being comparative with Buckingham Street. And then when I look Wanaka Lakefront, only goes up to 225, which you'd think, we are talking about commercial use of public land and the premium that fits to that for the operator. Whereas low down at 50 for GY, is that based on the number of amount of foot traffic or how do we explain that to the people going, why is there such a big gap between GY and Arrowtown?
It's purely location, and it's tied back to a rental that's assessed on buildings in that location. So that's how you get the location factor. That's why Glenorchy's so low. The building rentals there are much lower than in Buckingham Street versus the mall. So, and they don't pick and choose. They take the mall, for example, take that average rental of the buildings in the mall, and then it's 30% of that. So you've got some in the mall that 1,500 a square metre, some that are 2,500 a square metre. The newer, bit of MBS, sprinkled, whatever. We take those uniquenesses out of it, but just in that area, and that gives you the average for the building for that area. So that's locality. Same as when you're valuing a house. They can get different values of a house purely because of location. So that is all taken into consideration.
Okay.
Quick one, has there been much conversation with some of the licensees on these fee increases? We haven't done any consultation with them.
It was noted in the consultation that we're going to market rental.
Okay.
So it was quite clearly bulleted point on the front. There was no real communication we communicated directly with all of them to say it was out for public consultation. But
yeah, we've got some more public forum. So you charge this for your coffee and Glenorchy that you do in Arrowtown and see the recover the costs.
Okay.
Sorry, we digress.
Okay, yeah, we've got the proposed resolution in front of us. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Matt. Seconder. Thank you, Cody. Open for discussion.
Yeah, I'll just, observation really. I have no problem with charging a reasonable fee for basically a commercial operator to expand their footprint. And we should be charging because this is public land. So I have absolutely no problems with the fees. We just obviously need to deliver them in a timely manner, and there's justification for it, which we will be doing. I guess what it does highlight for me more is we've had a lot of discussions around street vendors, and especially those ones on the lakefront that are commercially successful and doing a very good trade, and probably what would be arguably a better site than a lot of the tenants that are renting at high rents around the mall and the lakefront. And although it's not a discussion for today, I just feel we have not quite got that right in terms of charging those vendors of those food carts and other retailers a disproportionate amount compared to the tenants that are paying the highest prices in the district.
Okay. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Aye. All those against? None. Motion carried. Thank you, councillors. Item 3, page 91, elderly housing. What's over to you again, Tony? Questions?
Got one. It's okay. It's on page 104 and it says, it uses the word minimum, and I'm just wondering if the word less or should be used. If 104 save and it says. Yeah, probably. It's in two places. So in the statement of proposal, page 104, under 33, tenant welfare once transfer is complete, and it's also in other parts as well. It says for the first 12 months, rents will be set at the minimum of a household's current QLDC established rent or income related rent established by MSD. Do you mean the lesser of rather than the minimum of? I don't understand. Is it a minimum? So you'll charge a minimum, but it could be more, or are you wanting the lesser of those two
I
things?
think the implication is the lesser of those
I'm
two.
just wondering if we could change that.
Yeah, I
wording
think
throughout,
that will clarify it. Yeah. That's, yeah.
Thank you. And the other question is just around the rent setting process, because for that first year, there's sort of no change for them. But under that trust rent setting process, what would those rents be now if it was converted to their system, do we know? So for a year they're in that phase that we just mentioned, but after a year, the trust rent setting process will apply. What would the rents be for those people? Would they go up? Would they go? Yeah, I know it will depend on, I'm talking about their market rental, sorry, not if they manage to get the government subsidy, just in terms of the rents are.
You mean like kind of dollar value wise, or
Yeah.
like kind of the increase proposal?
Yeah, I mean, have we looked at in a year's time, what would that increase be for those the tenants and those homes?
So they're just like kind of proposing to link it to CPI increase on those rentals.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a dollar value change, that's all. It's all right, if we don't know, we don't know.
Yeah, we don't have that percentage change, but then one of the big advantages is that I can't say with absolute certainty, but most of the people would be eligible to the IRS, which is benefit to them actually.
And it's something that council doesn't have access to get those grants because they're not a designated provider.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a couple of questions, Dave. The different option between long-term lease versus selling for $1 or whatever. What is the we've done it with a variety of ways with the housing trust. Is there any reason why we're looking at the transfer for $1 rather than a long-term lease?
Yeah, so in Wanaka, the transfer of ownership is critical. It's rather than a lease because it allows the trust to have the ability to upgrade in the site as a whole. If it was just a lease, it'd be more restrictive. It would come back to council. They don't have that long-term surety and ability to get something to finance.
Yeah, okay. So that's why that's one here. That's one. Second one, the bigger picture thing for Wanaka. This would be only elderly housing, but what if it goes out to consultation, people might say, well, you're still what other houses? You have got some other council's got some other property in Wanaka. For example, up on Collins Street and Timber Street. So I'm just trying to paint the picture. So we even though we're selling or closing to transfer this to a housing trust, we got. Can you just give a wee brief on what the intention is with the other land houses at this stage?
So good.
At this stage, we don't have any plans for that. That's something that will come back to dialogue with council. This was specifically around the elderly persons.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. But you kind of mentioned as part of the land review. But we're doing a review of all public land. I'm still we've already fed into that. So just so the public know that there's a review of all land, and that'll be at a later stage that will be addressed. What happens with those other properties?
You've probably made that announcement now, council.
Okay.
But that's not part of the statement of proposal.
No. I was wanting to
clarify that.
ask a question because I'm preempting questions that could come from the community.
Well, I suppose those.
Why we give out $2 million worth of land suddenly going out there? Well, what's that balance up? What are we going to get out of it? If we wanted to say, okay, we've got other public land, are you going to just give that to, or are we going to be? So I said, what I'm saying is that will be addressed in a later stage. Is that correct?
So this proposal is to deal with existing public housing transferring to a new public housing provider. That's what this proposal is. So in the sense that in one sense, he's not losing anything, it's just getting another provider who can access additional funding and has the capacity and through their trustee ability to extend and expand that public housing. Other land that council owns is a completely different thing. My view is if you added that into this, would just make this proposal quite confusing.
No, I don't want to add in, I'm just asking a question if it could be indicated that any trail or anything of future land has been looked at in a strategic land review, and we'll come back and.
I think you've pretty much done that.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to do it through a question.
Just a couple of things. I was reading the proposal, I got a little bit lost in there, but going through point 16 on page 93 talks about the Wanaka land, and then point 17 refers to both proposed transfers. Reading on that, point 17 is duplicated as point 23 as well on the same list, but then it goes into the Arrowtown part of it. But I got a little bit lost as to what it was trying to achieve with the Arrowtown land. It talks about transfer subdivision. I think it becomes clearer as we go through the actual statement of proposal. So I just wanted to confirm exactly what's happening. So the land in Arrowtown is to be subdivided to subdivide off those the housing, and that is it the land or the buildings that are being leased? Which is being leased and which is being sold? Part of it's being sold and part of it's being leased. Is that correct?
I think initially you'd have the lease of the buildings and the land until we can kind of go through that endowment kind of change, and then we can subdivide off the land for those houses, and then that can be transferred at a later point.
So point 20 says it's proposed that the buildings are leased to the housing trust. But there's a reference also later on to an Arrowtown, part of the Arrowtown, where is a proposed deed of transfer of asset Arrowtown, purchase price is $1. So what does that relate to? Is that the land buildings?
Yeah, so the process is initially transferring the buildings to the trust via a lease. Then we work through the process of subdividing it up from the rest of the reserve, which is where the more is. That could take a number of years. We want to be able to get the trust to have the buildings now. Eventually, but the intention clearly that once that subdivision is complete, that land is transferred as well. So we want it to be clear.
So at that point, it was the land and the buildings that transferred.
Chris, the whole everything on that section that is subdivided up.
So it's a little bit unclear as to what's being subdivided, what's being leased and what's being transferred.
So my understanding, and will confirm, because it's of the status of the land, we can't sell the land, we can't transfer it to them, so it's got to be leased, do the subdivision, get the land status changed, and then you're able to transfer the building and the land at that point. But until then, as I understand it, we can't transfer the ownership of the building on that land. So it's a two-step process.
So it's a 20-year lease because it could take somewhere between now and 20 years to achieve it. So point 28 where it says the proposed deed of transfer of asset Arrowtown purchase price is $1. Is that for that time in the future when the subdivision is completed?
Yes.
Right.
Do we need to make that SOP a bit clearer?
Well, I think it does become a little bit clearer in the SOP, but we'll just there.
Any further questions?
Hang on. Right here. It's similar wording in the SOP. I just wonder whether it does need to be a little bit clearer.
So can I take this to we'll look at that. If you agree with that, we'll try and make sure the wording is clear around those matters.
Process.
If you'll give us the ability to make some minor changes to improve clarity, we can do that.
Lisa?
Thank you. My questions are around understanding the Arrowtown Street site. It says that the land under the units is a fee simple title, and that would determine not to be on endowment land. How far does that boundary of that go? And I suppose my questions are raised between recent conversations we've been having around the needs of baskets blessings and operating on. Is where that section dog legs behind the church, unit A, B, C, D at 8 Marvin Street, where does the fee simple title finish? at the back of that? Or is it endowment land that continues all the way up behind the back of the church? My concern is, are we transferring a piece? Yeah, where does it switch from fee simple to endowment on the back boundary of that property? What else might it impact?
So I'm bringing out the map, so it might be able to help explain, but my understanding is one parcel of land there currently that the elderly housing is on, the memorial on the hill, the preschool daycare on the other side, and it comes down towards the church as well. That's one parcel of the land. It was endowment originally. There's some confusion around some of in the old document from more than 20 years ago that we're still working through to understand. That's why we have to account the city on the transfer time. There is, I don't understand the question about being two parcels. I think it is just one.
So it's still endowment land, or it's fee simple title under the.
You're looking at
apartment?
the area of photo in the
The area in the photo.
This is 8 Carnarvon Street.
Yeah,
Right.
attachment D, areas of property holder.
Oh, yeah.
I'm looking at that.
Page 119.
Page is that, page 119. So we're just talking about the land under the existing buildings. We're not talking about the strip that runs along behind the church fencing all the way out to the other side of, if you continue that picture out to the cemetery side of the endowment land. Is it simply the land that's under the apartments, or does it continue on behind the back of that picture?
We're only considering the land under the apartments. We're not looking at making any changes anywhere else. And if you look at the map, it's essentially a triangle shape. The piece of land.
That's the question.
Okay. So as long as it's restricted to the land under those buildings, it doesn't take a larger scale piece of the endowment land. Thank you.
Right, any further questions? Proposed resolutions before you. Do I have a mover?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mickey. Seconder, Mickey Ferg. Before we move on to discussion, I'd just like to find 3 volunteers for the hearings panel.
Yeah.
So, Councillor Gladding. Oh, well, so Matt, Lisa, and Nikki.
Should we go forward?
No, just only us 3 here. All good? Right, so who's the mover? Nikki and
Lisa.
Berg. Thank you. Right, discussion. Anyone? I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? None. Motion carried. Thank you.
So I'm just going to make those minor changes for clarity. on
Yeah,
that.
that'd be great, just make sure that
Right,
documents.
we're going for an hour and a half. We're doing for about 10 minutes. We'll break, freshen up, get some energy into the room.
Thank you.
Stretch a fair bit, eh? 120 of your papers. Again, hey, over here.
Thank you, this read.
Okay. Questions? Straightforward. No questions, do I have a mover? Red Barry, I'll second, discussion. Put it to the vote, all those in favour? Aye. All those against? None. Motion carried. Thank you. Item 5, Franklin Golf Club, page 147, electrical easement. Hey, over to you.
Thank you, this read.
You practice with that.
Questions?
I have a
Yeah.
question here. Can you just explain, this is very complicated, all the diagrams, what actually is happening?
Easy to go to
Diagrams, yeah, can you just explain?
attachment B,
Yeah.
which is each
154.
154, yep.
Yeah, attachment B, yeah.
the red dashed line
Line, yeah.
is the route that the underground power cables will take. Okay. If you go to the next page.
Yep.
C, that is the area through the reserve. So the green
Yeah.
covering that with the two green arrows between that, that is through the reserve. So that is the matter that we're
And
discussing.
are we talking about something underground?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Going underground.
It's all underground.
Okay. That is all my questions.
I have absolutely no idea about this infrastructure, but what I'm really interested in is sort of the long-term access and what disruption it may have long-term, say, in sealed areas that may go over this, that we've dotted line. And what does the access look like and what the disruption may look like they have to access for maintenance of that pipeline?
The overall master plan of the QEC was taken into consideration so that they didn't go and put these cables in places that could be built over in the future. So they've been cognizant of obviously existing infrastructure, trees, etc., and the roads, but the future, as much as possible, go around the edge of fields and behind the hockey turf, around the edge of the golf course.
Doing these sorts of things is also agreements that deal with if there is, they need to get an access and reinstatement of the areas and things.
Is it possible to have this ducted so that the ground doesn't have to be disturbed? In other words, it can be upgraded by pulling a larger cable through in the future if necessary?
It's probably not something that we can comment on. This is a proposal from Aurora on Eastern. It doesn't contemplate how they would actually put that cable in, as far as I know.
Actually, I think it's attached in the diagrams.
Say 158 shows the 150mm duct.
Yeah, the 158 on the right hand side, the 150 duct.
Doesn't say all that duct's for though.
No.
High voltage and low voltage cables.
Yeah, so given the number of cables going in there, possibly not without digging. And you have to have spacing between the cables due to the voltage. They can't all just be in the one duct side by side. There must be electrical arcing or something like that. I've got no idea, but there is a space distance they have to have.
I think if you also look at the subsequent photos, you'll see that this is essentially either being located over a sort of the gravel trail or in open space. So we've also got to accept the cost of what you might put underground versus the likelihood of actually getting impact anything you put up. The whole thing's been designed to have minimal impact.
Yeah.
Following on from that, I do have a very little concern, I guess, about the location of the cabling where it goes around the path, around the cricket, around field 1B, 1A and 1D. It does show directly underneath the path that's quite recently been constructed, sealed.
Yeah.
So they're intended that it will be directly underneath that path or
No,
adjacent to it?
No, it will be either side. This is the general indication of the route that it's going to take.
Well, there's a relatively detailed drawing in the actual power drawings that gives quite a lot of detail about where it is, and it shows it directly underneath the path. But then the next question is that obviously wherever it is, in the path or beside it, there's disruption there, and what provisions will be made for people being able to use that while it's in the 4A path.
That have to make alternative of access for people. They can't just take away that access without providing suitable access.
Yeah, so the alignment of this and the discussions have involved some Patrick has been involved, and the parks reserves in terms of trees. So I'm assuming that all those sorts of things have been covered off and be aware of that because of the potential. So I don't have a direct answer for you.
My next question was going to be my first question. As a step back from that, has this come about from an application from Aurora or whoever's putting it in, or Simon Matrix perhaps had some input into it, but was there any consideration to the cable going directly down the line of the reserve for Joe O'Connell Drive to the boundary of the airport land and then across the boundary rather than zigzagging across the back of the hockey turf and then down the boundary between the golf course and the rugby field?
I'm not sure we can answer that.
The reason I ask is that there does always seem to be a lot of uncertainty about what the future solution might be for rugby fields and golf courses and around that area. We're ending up with a power cable right down the middle of that land, which is owned by council, both sides of it, as opposed to the boundary with the airport.
If you extend Joe O'Connell Drive down where the car parking is, this building is shown on the master plan, so that's why they haven't gone through there. So they've recognised what could be there in the future, no certainty, and as much as possible worked around what's there now and what could be there in the future.
I think there is also the benefit as to where it zigzags past the hockey turf is that it feeds the golf centre as well, isn't it?
There's some overhead power lines out to the golf house, which will go underground as part of this as well. Hence why it's.
Okay, thank you.
Just one more, I hadn't picked up the path, so no, but do we normally get an easement agreement as part of these reports? I just seem to remember we used to get detailed easement agreements that sort of set out all the requirements.
In terms of
The actual agreement would be in the report. I'm just wondering, I mean, just the questions would normally be answered, I think, around reinstatement and access and various things.
Those will be part and parcel of putting the services in. They have to reinstate.
I know, but what I'm saying, there is an easement agreement normally, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So normally that would be part of the report. I seem to remember.
Sorry, no, if easement would have been
with survey drawings and the like.
Well, conditions.
Well, that would happen after the easement's created.
Normally the cables are in the ground before the surveys are created because they could alter by 1 or 2 meters, given things like paths, and trees and things they might discover. And then you have a confirmed survey drawing of the locations after.
It's built, it's done once it's built.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further questions? All right, put it toward you. Any movers? Thank you, Cody. Seconder. Okay, thank you, Lyle. All those in favour? Aye. Against? None. Motion carried. Thank you. CapEx May forecast, item 6, page 169 of your papers.
Stu, councillors, worship. We know Jeremy. Jeremy's done most of the work on this paper. It's a relatively minor adjustment, but provided for transparency purposes. So happy to take any questions. But it's a procedural matter.
Questions, councillors?
I've got a few questions for clarification, please, on the spreadsheet. just trying to understand, what about the movement of from the water sports facility, line one basically. I'm pretty surprised at stage 5, I don't know what the basis is for the significant increase here, but I understand it's only just gone to 10, hasn't it? What are we basing the figure on?
The budget was originally sufficient and was reduced through the LTP process and then was subsequently re-evaluated. Yeah, just short from what we used to do.
We just speak up if the media find it hard to hear staff responses.
Sorry, these questions might probably are more the technical side of it rather than the financial side. This is the issue. Because the next one was you're taking 50K from the water sports facility project, which is still underway, but we haven't got clarification on we've got money there to sort out the car parking, which was being done. So these are getting into the detailed projects rather, and I'm just trying to understand. Flicking that money across to there, we haven't actually got a tendered price for the stage 5. So this is the basis for it, basically.
It was based on the comment says the December 23 QS estimate, which was on 90% of the detailed design being completed.
Okay.
Jeremy works closely with the holders of the CapEx budgets.
Yep.
To make these adjustments, so we'll combined effort.
Okay. Well, that'd be a step from this. We'll get an explanation on the water sports one. The next one was I had a question about just understanding what number 51. What's a building maintenance system?
Property guys are still here.
Is that a
computer
system?
Security access codes.
It's an overall system, so you can hook in like kind of your aircon, your security, lighting controls or stuff like that, all under like one combined system, and you can have it across multiple facilities.
Okay. Line 99 down under transport, just trying to understand which Queenstown strategic land purchase. This is before the end of June. We're talking, are we? These are another 4.9 million.
No, it's not. There's no more funds. This relates to purchases that have already been made through the arterial project process. So that was flagged in the report when we requested the increased budget. But these purchases are actually not part of the asset that we're building. They're ancillary, so they need their own budget essentially, so that we can report them properly. So the money's actually been spent.
Final question is really just to understand what's happening for the next session of this on the carry forwards with the lot of project, each area's got a line of under 500,000, under 500,000 K job. It adds up to about 19 million in the annual plan. At the next session when we do carry forwards, will we get some sort of breakdown of where we're at with that?
There's a paper that will come to council that requests the carry forwards, and you'll be able to see down to project level which projects are included in that.
Okay, thank you.
One more, and it's just for clarification. I'm just looking at the one development as Councillor Cox was, and just looking at where the money came from to fill that up, and just trying to get an understanding of the budget lines that you can use for looking money from here to there, because we've got 100K from Lakeview Rockpool going to Wanaka Lakefront, and we've got 140K from Wakatipu Active Travel going to Wanaka Lakefront. Just trying to understand for myself the budget crossovers and where you can take and where you can.
Eroding, they're unsubsidised, so and it's some like active travel on the waterfront. So there's some of that, and also Rockfall. It's just planting projects, so it's similar to the parks projects. So
essentially, where they're funded from.
Yeah, so when we collect DCs, when we're looking at the cost of Lakeview Rockfall and where that money should come from, it's now gone to Wanaka Travel. I suppose you work all that out too.
Yeah, and it's often not the full budget of these projects. It's the elements that are not required for whatever reason, or if it's not proceeding.
Right.
So there's a variety of reasons, but it essentially comes back to the funding. We wouldn't be looking to undermine our analysis for DCs through a transfer through this process.
think, just as an aside, it would be quite helpful to have a sort of a bit of a workshop and trying to understand some of the details around the funding stuff. Money's
Probably
floating
is.
around place to place and some point. Thanks.
Right. Further questions? Motions before you. Do I have a mover?
Yeah.
Thank you, Nikki. Seconder. Thank you, Barry. Discussion. None at all. That's pretty tight, 2.6% movement. Well done. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? None. Motion carried. Item 7, brothel bylaw, page 180. Carry. Oh, Michelle. Michelle. Michelle.
You're happy to say your paper's read?
Questions, councillors?
You have a number of questions on something.
I'll start then if he's not ready. So I think I understand it all. Is there any way that we can go out, like instead of choosing what the area is today, that we can just go out in the consultation and say, what's your preferred area? And we list 3 areas. Is that possible?
Through your worship, we need to put a proposed recommended option out to the community, but based on these 4, it is open as an outcome of the feedback received to change that for the final bylaw if it's based on what we get back from the community. So council does need
Is
to
that like
elect
a
an option.
governmenty rule that we have to have something, we can't go here,
Correct.
like here it is all, but here, this little section is a choice of 3.
But I just want to reiterate that the way the statement of proposal is phrased is that there is room for council to move between the 4 options proposed for a final bylaw.
Okay.
Yeah, so following on from that, is there any, because the statement of proposal doesn't show those other options as such, it just shows one option. And then, it's up to the submitters to say, well, we think it should be different, we do the same. Is there any way that that statement of proposal can include those other options that are in this agenda for us to consider?
Through your worship, we can do that, but I would say that the survey questions very clearly ask the 4 questions. And we don't put the copy for the Let's Talk survey into the attachment to the report. But the way it's been designed by comms is that it's got the options as laid out in this report in each of a question, and it asks the submitter to choose which is their favorite option.
It's just based on a description of the street, the areas.
It's got a map.
Right.
With a
So
legend,
those 3 maps.
actually improving on what the
Right. One that shows Q1, Q2, Q3, W1, W1, W3.
Sorry?
Those maps, the photos that show Q1 to 3 and W1 to 3 will be in that survey one.
I've actually clarified further from what's in the council report, so it's a little bit easier to follow because I recognise there isn't, the report maps are correct, but I think that it could be clearer. So we've done that for the consultation materials, but just to go back to the point on the statement of proposal, we're not obligated to include those 4 options in that proposal, but we can do that if that's council's directive as an outcome of today.
I think, for me, I think it would be beneficial. The other question I really had about Q1, area Q1 in particular, was that it runs, and that's the one that's presented as the preferred option, I guess, consultation rates, is that it runs right up and adjacent to Queenstown Primary School. It includes all of the Lakeview site. And I wasn't sure why it was so big, why it went right up to those areas.
Through your worship, the rationale, the black line follows exactly the town centre zone in the proposed district plan. So the reason that was put forward was for consistency. It's easy for the monitoring enforcement team to educate based on what we know are the main commercial areas in both townships. But as per the options, it's open to council to decide to vary.
Okay, thank you.
Question, it says the bylaw is the most appropriate way of addressing the perceived problem. Can you explain what the perceived problem is?
perceived problem is the balancing act between ensuring that the principles of the Prostitution Reform Act are adhered to, as well as being sensitive to community sensitivities around the issue. So council's in a position of having to balance those two.
Okay, so, why are we, would be under a bylaw, would be addressing these small businesses? Basically, it's a small business in a different way to other small businesses, which have some of the other small businesses that are operating in the district, but also create nuisance and disturbance. Why are we addressing this type of small business in a different way, or proposing to under a bylaw rather than the district plan?
Essentially because the Prostitution Reform Act enables council to have a bylaw in this regard, should it see the need to.
Okay, so the act enables us to have one there.
It gives you the option of doing it through a bylaw or the district plan or both.
Yeah, I understand, okay. So that's why we don't sort of do bylaws for other small businesses, because they haven't got an act. Oh, right.
I wouldn't want to generalize, but that would be my assumption, yeah. I think we saw some figures when we discussed this around volume of potential, either in Q2 or Q1. If we extend the area, with Q1 so much being undeveloped, I'm just trying to future project into how much we may be enabling by making a decision over land which isn't currently really fully enabled. Whereas if we look at Q2, I think we had some quite specific numbers around what capacity this might enable. Through your worship, my recollection is that it's difficult to pinpoint an exact figure because when we initially did this resource, what's coming to mind is that there would be an opportunity for around 70 additional places that are deemed residential within that town centre zone that could be SUG opportunities if that were taken. I think in Q2 and Q3. That's Q1. I don't know for Q2 and Q3. For Q1 is the entire town centre zone, and that is what we did a rough count out, acknowledging that it's not scientific to establish it. We haven't honed in on the exact figures for Q2 as an option, but my overarching comment would be the reminder that our bylaws are generally renewed with every 5 years. So there is definitely the opportunity to revisit, and if council sees a need, it can review bylaws in advance of that as well. So if we were to look at Q2 as moderately expanding rather than if that was to go as the recommended option, because Q1 has so much unknown about it, that could be reviewed again in 5 years. Is that what you're saying?
Just wondering whether you could remind me the distance you can operate a brothel from a sensitive location, like a school, cemetery. Is that included as a sensitive location? At churches that we know are also as the worship.
So the question is whether
what the distance is to operate a brothel from a sensitive location.
Well, within the permitted activity area, they may not be 100 meters. Yeah, between each. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that between each brothel or I think he was asking sensitive areas?
So into a church or to a school.
Outside the permitted activity area. Stop. Sorry, I'm not following the question. I don't.
It was a very simple question, I thought, but I've probably posed it badly. What is the distance you can operate a brothel from a sensitive location like a cemetery, school, or church?
Okay, sorry. Sorry, Your Worship. I think that the distinction is that our bylaw doesn't actually address the sensitive area function. Yeah.
And so currently, as the draft reads, it is at 100 metre between brothels, not sensitive areas. It would be a further change to the draft to add in requirements around sensitive areas, what a sensitive area or location is. In addition to that, other councils that have done that have had to keep a register of sensitive locations, and then there's grandfathering clauses that need to go in so that if there's a pre-existing brothel, what its rights are in relation to a new sensitive site. So it's not inconceivable, it's done. It just adds an additional layer of complexity to the
So
bylaw.
we would be relying on the Act then and referring to the Act? Or are you saying that the Act doesn't have a?
The Act doesn't address sensitive
Oh,
sites.
doesn't.
No.
Oh, okay. Right, good to know.
It is which one?
Yes, through the chair, obviously, the Act enables councils to manage brothels by a bylaw or the district plan or both. During the consultation process, will there be an opportunity to get some indication whether people think a bylaw is necessary or whether we can just manage it under the district plan?
Through your worship, yes, there's definitely a question asking whether or not respondents would prefer not to have a bylaw at all.
Thank you. First question is just around the purpose. So where we've changed it on page 199. I'm just wondering why we've written it this way, to enable commercial sexual service providers to operate within the district in a manner that both meets community demand for services and addresses community concerns and sensitivities. I'm just wondering why we decided that we wanted to meet demand, because it's quite a strategic position to take. I'm just not sure there's anything in the Act that drives us to meet demand. And I'm a bit concerned that then the purpose could work against some of the other provisions that we might want to put in there. I'm just concerned that that's unnecessary wording, I guess.
I think, I think the wording was put in quite clearly to reflect the fact that prostitution is a legal activity. So there is a market demand, there's a market element to it that can be amended.
Yeah, I mean, I understand there is demand, absolutely, but I just don't think that our bylaw needs to meet that demand. I don't see that there's a legal requirement for a bylaw to meet demand, because obviously there's a trade-off between sensitivities and concerns. And
through you, Worship, I think the context there is more in relation to the Prostitution Reform Act, which, as Michelle says, it's a legal profession, and so I understand your comment about responding to demand, but that it is a profession that's entitled to be undertaken, and so the fact that it is undertaken means there is some demand.
But we don't need to, I understand that there's no requirement for us to write it, that our bylaw and the areas that we place in there and the restrictions around sensitive areas that may come through from consultation, if they butt up against meeting demand, you've got a conflict between trying to address your concerns and sensitivities. Well, yeah, how would you suggest, if I wanted to make a change to that purpose statement, to remove the meeting demand component, what would be a better wording? Just because if we have to change things on the fly, we have to change.
Yeah, through you, Rochelle, I'm happy to revisit the wording, but I'm probably not going to do it off the cuff without having a closer look at it. So if council is inclined to give me a recommendation on alternative wordings there, I'm happy to.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of meeting the requirements of the.
Keep to a question. Non-discussion. Question, please.
Right, next question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the other thing I wanted to say was a nice approach to scope. It looks really, really wide in that if we, the panel, whoever's sitting on that panel can change things up depending on what comments they receive, even if it's not written into the SOP. That was the impression I got. You've got a scope statement that's quite wide. You would agree that?
Yeah. A question. Have you got a question?
Yeah, give me a second, will you?
Hang on. Calm down. Question. It's question time. We've gone through this before. Question, please.
Just give me a second, please. I did have one more, but I've lost where I'm at.
Okay.
Um,
Any further questions? No questions? Right. Motion's before you. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Cody. Do I have a second? I'll have that. Thank you, Barry. I have to call up
like,
4 councillors.
go through the minutes.
Yeah, okay, I'll just call up the 4 councillors first. Councillors, Cody, thank you. Melissa, Berg. Any further? We've got 4. And Gavin as well. Thank you. We're open to discussion. Discussion. There you
I'd
go.
like to get a council put forward an amendment.
Gavin.
Yeah, I guess with the discussion that we've had around the areas, and given that we're basing from the existing bylaw and reviewing it, my preference would probably be that we start off as our starting point, the intermediate area, the moderately expanded area, and rather than the bigger area, or I guess including the bigger area as the default position of the statement of proposal. So yeah, I was just letting everyone, the other councillors know that that's what's in my mind, whether we consider the Q2 and W2 areas as the default position, I guess. Let's see comment on that to either go for Q1, Q3, or W1, W3, or Q2 and W2.
Are you going to put an amendment?
Well, there's not really an amendment to the
There would be an amendment to the motion. You'd probably want to make an amendment that actually changes the presumption in the same statement of the proposal.
Because the motion, I guess it covers the statement of proposal as it stands now, doesn't it? Yes, it's document. But I wasn't sure how you would adopt that as an amendment. Is it amending that particular?
Amending the SOP.
Through you, Worship, it's view that the recommendations in the report wouldn't need to change, but it would need to be minuted that councillors adopted for option 2, 3, or 4. And so that's part of the record, and then officers would proceed to adjust the consultation materials that go out to the community.
No, I think it would be stronger. It doesn't need to change the form of it, but I think you would need to amend a resolution to amend something proposal to make the option, W1 and W2 and Q2 as the preferred,
The default,
as the proposed areas. That's what I understand you saying, councillor.
So yes, so that would be, so yes, so you're saying amendment to item 6, which says adopt the statement of proposal, we'd adjust the wording of that to state that the statement of proposal would be modified to reflect that area change.
Amended to proposed W2, Q2.
Q2, W2 would be the preferred.
Does this just mean that we're going with option 2?
I think it does, doesn't it? The options aren't referred to in the resolution. That was where I guess wasn't sure how it's handled.
Because the option 2.
Hang on. So are you happy? Are you going to put forward an amendment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That the areas that are shown in the statement of proposal are based on Q2 and W2.
So under 6, so amend the statement of proposal to recommend Q2 and W2 as the preferred option, and for consultation with the special council of the Pacific. All right, we have a mover. Do we have a seconder? We'll take Mel for that one. We'll open it up for discussion. Any further discussion?
So I'd like another amendment.
Hang on, we'll.
Do I do one at a time? Yeah, that's fine.
No further discussion. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment? Aye. Aye. All those against? Against. Thank you, Lyle. Right, now we're moving back to the substantive motion with the change number 6. Now, Nikki, you want to put another proposed amendment?
Thanks, yeah. So I'd just like to propose that we reword 2.1b of the draft bylaw to, and this is where I'm going to need some help with the wording, but I'd like to remove the requirement to meet community demand. And I'll just speak to that, but I'd like somebody to sort of propose some alternative wording. I think we.
Hang on. We haven't got it through
Yeah,
yet.
okay, fair enough.
So it'll have to be 8, I assume.
Operating in the district.
So reword proposed bylaw 2.1B.
I think you would basically delete 2.1B and substitute 2.1B with the new purpose statement.
I mean, if we just remove the words in a manner that, sorry.
We just say enable commercial sexual service providers to operate within the district
In a
that
manner,
both meets community.
I don't think it needs to both, I think,
Both.
within the district in a manner that addresses community's concerns and sensitivities, so that they're enabled to operate, but it also addresses community concerns and sensitivities. But it doesn't have to meet the demand.
So we're saying
If I
strike out,
reread it,
just strike out meets community demand for services.
strike out meets community demand for services and.
Sorry. And just leave addresses
So hang on.
community.
So 2.1B will read, enable commercial sexual service providers to operate within the district in a manner that addresses community concerns and sensitivities. So we're striking out both meets community demand for services and.
Yeah, correct.
Can I think that's actually, I don't think that then fairly reflects the intention of the legislation, because effectively one of the things that council needs is balance the opportunity for demand to occur and community sensitivity. It can't overly weight either provision. So I think somehow recognising that there's a balance to be struck between the two should be part of the.
Okay, so I'll just
Hang on.
speak.
No, you can't speak to anything at the moment. Right.
I disagree because I don't think the
No,
act speaks.
Hang on, you can't speak to it. Right. So have we got it written down? Yeah.
No, I haven't. So it would be a new.
Yep, 8.
Yeah.
Reword. Reword. Purpose statement 2.1B from proposed to, and then I'll just read it.
Wording to new wording which reads. Yeah.
Okay, right. So before us, we have the council reword the purpose statement 2.1B, the current wording to the new wording, which reads, and I'll send that enable commercial sexual service activities to operate within the district in a manner that addresses community concerns and sensitivities. We have a mover. Do we have a second? Thank you, Mel. Right, now we're open for discussion.
Right, so I'll just start that one. I think, given what we just read out, enables quite enabling, right? Like you're enabling commercial sexual service providers to operate. And I think that's what the PRA does. It enables them to operate. There is nothing within the PRA that speaks to meeting demand. In fact, it says it doesn't endorse, but it enables. So it's decriminalising and allowing it to occur, which is exactly the same as enabling sexual service providers to operate. But we want to do it in a way that addresses community concerns and sensitivities. I'm just really wary that if we put our purpose as meeting demand, then we could be required to loosen up a whole bunch of protections that address community concerns and sensitivities. I just think it went too far. I don't think we need to under that. That's it.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I originally saw what Mike was trying to say in terms of meeting demand, but hearing Nikki, it does explain to me enabling is enough to acknowledge, because that's the whole point of the act. The bylaw. that we're trying to give space for in a sensitive manner. So just to clarify, do you feel like that new wording doesn't discredit the nature of the bylaw? So that was your concern.
So my concern is that part of the whole process and this, how the whole discussion is, and this is where bylaws have failed in the past, is where they've sought to address community concerns to the point where they've actually not and been found illegal in terms of enabling the principal purpose of the Act to be enabled. So you can't create outcomes that address community concerns in such a way that you actually undermine core purpose of the legislation. That's my point, and that's it. And so I think the key issue, and I think the wording has tried to get that, is to actually balance the needs of actually providing for demand and addressing community concerns.
I just want to make sure that at the moment we've got our chief executive giving what's effectively legal advice, and I'd prefer if we actually had counsel in the room. If there is, you need to come and speak to this point.
So what's the point of order under what standing orders?
I
see he is here to give free and frank advice. That's his job.
I'm not a lawyer.
I did seek clarification.
Yeah, and it was seek clarification. So he's allowed to give advice. Continue, you finished or?
I've finished.
Okay, thank you. Right.
Thanks.
Any further discussion? Lisa?
I suppose I'm looking at purpose statement A, that we support the purpose and intent of the Prostitution Reform Act. Excuse me, and the opening words of B, to enable the commercial activity. And I also think that while this speaks to brothels and SOOBs, we also acknowledge that we provide opportunity within the hospitality sector for services to be extensively accommodated through our district as comparative to some other communities that may not have the offerings that we do. So I'm kind of comfortable that we do provide opportunity, and that concern around addressing the concerns and sensitivities. I feel that purpose A and the beginning of purpose B still enable service provision, and that we balance that with our community concerns and sensitivities, especially in areas which are still at this point in time greenfield development, that we might be creating unintentional consequence through opening up wider areas where we already do have substantial provision for service providers to operate within our district.
I agree with Lisa on I do feel like A does cover the purpose, that we're still supporting the purpose and intent of the Act itself and everything in that.
Okay, put it to the vote. This is just for the amendment again, the changing of the wording. All those in favour? All those against? 6. Motion failed. Moving back to the substantive motion. Sorry.
Yeah, I say something. Can I move another amendment?
Go for it.
Can I speak to it before I move it, or?
No, you got to move it, then we've got to find a second.
I'll move that we note the report. 2, the council does not endorse the draft brothel control bylaw to 2024 and regulates brothel activity through the district plan.
Do we have a seconder?
Put us out of our misery, but okay.
The councillor, no seconder, so.
Right.
I'm not taking it any further. Right. Back to the substantive motion, 3 to 1, through to 7 with the amendment at 6. Remind me.
The addition,
No, that failed.
oh, yes, sorry.
The movers and the seconders.
Councillor Tucker and Councillor
Tucker and Bruce moved and second. I'm going to open up for discussion one last time. Any further discussion?
Just to confirm that, so we're going with B, but somewhere there will be an option for people to say we prefer A or C.
Yes.
Okay,
Good.
good.
Right.
I understand this all as I've indicated, I don't actually see the need for this bylaw. We're talking about a small business. We don't treat any other small business this way. We actually haven't got any registered brothels, I understand, so we're basically talking about a bylaw to control something we haven't actually got activity in. And as reflected this last half hour, 3/4 of an hour, costs, the workload, trying to get a bylaw in place. And we've got the ability to manage it through the district plan, so I don't support the concept of having a brothel bylaw. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Aye. All those against? One against. Motion carried. Thank you, councillors. Item 8. Submission, retrospective approval of Queenstown Lakes District Council submission. Page 220. Kerry. And Luke.
Happy to take the front.
Questions? Any questions? Okay, do I have a mover? Thank you, Cody. Second, Kevin. Any discussion? Appreciate the work. Appreciate the work. Thank you very much. Okay. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Motion carried.
That's quick, yeah. Thanks, Lou.
Item 9, reserves Frankton Bus Hub, page 235. Thanks, Nick. How are you? Okay. Any questions? None whatsoever. No? Do I have a mover? I'll move. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Lyle. Any discussion? To the vote. All those in favour? Aye. Against? None. Motion carries.
Thanks.
Nice drive back.
Okay, item 10, page 242. Luma Light Festival Reserve Licence. Are you around? Take it as read?
It's read.
Right. Questions, councillors?
So just to clarify, so page 244 talks about 3 days a month and 6 days maximum. So does that, can that only be achieved by having 3 days at the end of 1 month and the beginning of the month?
Yes, and that's why we've only issued through the chair a 1-year licence, and we're looking to make a minor amendment to the reserve management plan, because we understand, you know, now that Luma's a recognised event, so we're working with Luma at the moment, and is after the event this year, we're coming back with a minor amendment to the plan.
Okay, and then so the other thing I queried or just had a question about was 5 days of the event is one thing. There's also the 10 days to set up and the 7 days to pack up afterwards. So it effectively ends up being 22 days. But
so
how does that fit into it?
Yeah, through the chair, we're saying that they're not actually taking up and not allowing people into the garden at that time. They are setting up, but then they're still allowing movement and flow through. And so that's why we're able to allow it this year. But again, that's where we will make that minor amendment to allow for that pack in, pack out in future.
Yeah, so also even during the 5 days, the Luma south goes from 5 PM to 10 PM. The garden's still open outside of those hours or up to 5 PM, is that correct?
Not while it's fenced for the ticketed event during those 5 days.
So yeah,
there's certain areas that people can access, but where the event is on.
With the level, it depends on the weather sometimes too. There's a lot of damage to the gardens, lawn areas. Who covers the costs to repair or reinstate those areas? Is it just come out of council budgets, or is it the Luma contribute to that?
Luma, there's a bond, but Luma do reinstate those areas, and there's special areas that are covered over the grass, etc., to remediate to make sure that there's no issues there. So it's been going now since 2016, and there's been a lot of learnings over the years, and so there's mitigation put in place to reduce that damage to the gardens, and also looking at weather
patterns around that time to see if there is anything coming up that we could do to put extra protection in place.
Is there any provision in the license for a locals rate? Sorry.
No, the reason it is ticketed is to control the numbers now because it was getting so large, and that's why it's spread over 5 days instead of compacted over 3 days as well. And that's what we're looking at with this new revision as well.
Should have got your early bird.
Yeah.
Okay.
Couple of questions here. So the total tickets sold last year, do we know how many went through the festival last year?
I don't have the detail. Do you? No.
It's 50,000 2019, but I couldn't find the numbers for last year, and I want to know whether it's an increase or decrease on last year's numbers, essentially.
Sorry, I don't have those figures with me.
Okay, that's all right. Secondly, the liability of $2 million, that figure, where does that come from? And I just looked at that liability for that many people going through and question whether that's enough.
It's sort of our standard insurance policy for events like that, and that's what we're using for that, but we can look into that.
Because this event, I assume, is larger than most of the others in terms of volume of people going through.
Yeah, it's the only event of the size in the gardens, but as I said, we've had previous years' experience and understand that impact with these numbers, and that's why we're limiting it to 10,000 per night.
Yeah. So
and looking at
50,000 max over 5 days.
Yeah.
The third sort of question or observation I sort of had was extending it from 3 days to 5 days, even though in point 10 it says it reduces the impact on the gardens, but in that, my way of thinking of it is, I've been there on that night where it was pretty muddy and wet, is that it increases the risk of damage because it increases the chances of a weather event over 5 days versus 3 days. So you might get a weather event on the 4th day versus 3 days of fine weather. So I just wonder whether point 10 there is accurate in the fact that it actually increases the risk of damage to the gardens.
Yeah, I think we have to look at it in terms of the whole event and the numbers that we're going previously through there. And we've set that number at 10,000, and we're going to monitor it this year, and we're working closely with Luma just to understand that effect on the gardens. And again, with weather events, looking to see just the forecast, and if there is anything planned, then there is controls in both the hire agreement and the lease for us to look at what we can do there to mitigate that. But yeah, it is something that we will monitor to see what's appropriate.
Thank you.
No further questions? Anyone care to move? Thank you, Gavin. Seconder. Thank you, Lisa. Any discussion? Well done. All those in favour? Aye. Against? None. Motion carried. Thank you. Chief Executive's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One key item in this report, that's rounding off noting of the committee meetings, Community Services Committee and the one about the Community Board and those reports, the substantive recommendations regarding the establishment of the Community Fund panel to hear and consider applications for the community grants, and outlined in the paper both the composition being the full council, the process for consideration, and report back to council with recommendations from the panel on the 27th of June 2024.
Questions? No questions. Okay. Where am I moving?
Just clarify that. When was the 27th? What was that on the 27th?
That's the date at which council will finally adopt the recommendations of the panel.
Yes. I just did have one chief executive communicate to the applicants by the end of July 2024 the sum that need to know before the beginning of the financial year.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, the decisions will be, the approved amounts of funding will be in the council papers. I suppose that relates to the formal writing to them and communicating that, as opposed to that being the first time they'll know the answer. They'll know the answer immediately.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Barry. Seconder. Thank you, Ferg. Any discussion? None at all. Those in favour? Aye. All those against? None. Motion carries. Right. PX, we move into public excluded. Thank you, Barry. All those in favour?
Aye.